by the year 277 AC, it had become very clear to all at court that King Aerys II Targaryen and his unusual behaviour, hyperfixations, changeable personality, and outbursts of anger were much more than just isolated incidents. It was plain to see that the once promising young king, now 33 years of age, was rapidly falling into what some were starting to call madness. The story goes that Aerys lunged into an abyss with no hope of recovery after one single event changed him forever, and even historians look back on it as a fundamental turning point in the history of Westeros, thanks to the demons it unleashed onto the realm. The Defiance of Duskendale. Duskendale was an ancient harbour town, north up the coast of King's Landing, on the shores of Blackwater Bay. Before Aegon's conquest, it had been the main trading hub on the eastern mainland of Westeros, with the petty kings of House Darkland for centuries becoming rich off trade from across the narrow sea. All of that changed with the formation of King's Landing. This new city became the centre of trade, and while Duskendale did still prosper, not near to the same extent as it once had before. It had once been the seat of the petty kings of House Darkland during the days of the Hundred Kingdoms, with its young lord in 277 AC, Dennis Darkland, now struggling to deal with the town's dwindling trade and being pressured by not only rich merchants and townsfolk, but the general smallfolk population of Duskendale. Historians, maesters, lords and smallfolk alike in the years since the Defiance had debated why Lord Darklyn chose the extreme course of action he did, but the most popular theory is that his Myrish wife, Lady Serala, played at least some part in his decision. Her detractors, of whom there is many, blame her solely for what transpired in that faithful year of 277. The laced serpent, they have named her, poisoned Lord Darkland against King Aerys II with her pillow talk. But those few who do defend her insist that there is little to no proof to support this claim, with it being baseless speculation, and lay the blame for the folly at Lord Darkland himself, with the hate directed towards his wife being down to her gender and foreign birth, praying to alien gods. The events of the Lycene Spring and the rise and fall of House Rogaire during the regency of King Aegon III is often cited as a similar case. Lord Dennis desired to win a charter for the town of Duskendale that would give it more autonomy from the crown itself, in a similar fashion that had been done for Dorne for many years by this point in time. It was this notion that Duskendale should be treated equally to Dorne that started the troubles. In truth, it did not seem that much of a vast demand, as charters akin to this were very common across the narrow sea in the homeland of Lady Serala, information she surely would have passed on to her lord husband. Yet given that this is Westeros and not the free city of Myr, it is understandable why the king's hand, Lord Tywin Lannister, a hard negotiator at the best of times, firmly and soundly rejected Lord Dennis's request. Objectively, this was the correct decision by the hand, as it may well have set a dangerous precedent with the other large port towns of Westeros like Old Town and White Harbour, or even the island of Driftmark, which had never truly recovered from the damage caused by the Dance of the Dragons. Angered by Lord Tywin's refusal to entertain the idea, Lord Darkland, with likely the help of his wife, devised a new plan to win his charter that would lower the port fees, tariffs, and allow Duskendale once more to vie for trade with King's Landing. But as history has shown us, this plan was folly and foolish. What became the Defiance of Duskendale began slowly and quietly. Lord Dennis, seeing that King Aerys' erratic behaviour had begun to strain the relationship with his hand, Tywin Lannister, Dennis refused to pay the taxes expected of him. Taking this a step further, he invited the king himself to Duskendale to hear his petition. It is unlikely the king would grant such a request, especially a king like Aerys, who left the running of the realm to his small council. For him, this was a matter of little consequence. That is, until Tywin Lannister advised the king to refuse the invitation in the strongest possible terms, whereupon the king decreed he would accept Lord Dennis's invite and travel to Duskendale on the morrow. He informed Grand Maester Pycelle and the small council that he meant to settle this charter matter himself and bring the defiant Lord Dennis to heel. This was all against the pleading of Tywin and the small council. The king travelled to Duskendale with a small escort led by Sir Gawain Gaunt of the Kingsguard. The invitation was indeed a trap, one the king walked into like a lamb to the slaughter. Aerys was seized with his escort somewhere between King's Landing and Duskendale, with most of the party killed, including Ser Gawain, who died defending his king valiantly. While some at court surely suspected foul play the moment Lord Dennis offered his invitation, the general mood of the court and the wider realm was of shock, soon followed by outrage. More hot-headed members of the court urged a sudden assault upon Duskendale to free Aerys and capture Lord Dennis, dead or alive, for such a brazen attack on the crown. But Duskendale was one of the oldest towns in Westeros, and surrounded by strong high walls. And then there was the Dunfort itself, the ancient seat of House Darklyn, to contend with, which overlooked the harbour. Sieging Duskendale would be no easy task, storming the Dunfort even more troublesome. With Aerys in irons, Lord Tywin, as Hand of the King, was now effectively ruling the Seven Kingdoms. He sent out riders and ravens, gathering forces while commanding the Darklyns to give up the king and surrender. Lord Dennis rather sent word that if any attempt was made to attack his walls, he would put Aerys to death. Many in the small council believed this was a bluff, declaring that no son of Westeros would commit such a horrific crime. But the reality is, Lord Dennis could never afford to give up such a valuable hostage by killing him. Regardless, Tywin would not take the chance, and instead, with a large army, moved to surround Duskendale by both land and sea. With Tywin's rural army set outside his walls and his supply chains cut off, Lord Darklyn's steel began to falter. He made several efforts to parley, but Tywin refused to entertain him, instead repeating his demands of an unconditional surrender of the town and its castle with the safe release of the king. The defiance lasted for half a year. It is said that inside the walls of Duskendale, the mood began to sour fast as the food stores began to run dry. Yet, huddled in the Dunfort, Lord Dennis was convinced that it was only a matter of time before Tywin weakened and offered him better terms. It is clear that Lord Dennis did not know Tywin Lannister. Instead, the Hand's heart grew harder, and he sent Lord Dennis one final demand for surrender. Should he refuse yet again, Tywin promised he would take the town by storm and put every man and woman and even the children to the sword. There is one legend that Lord Tywin sent this demand with a bard and commanded him to sing the now infamous song The Rains of Castamere for Lord Dennis and his wife as a warning what would befall them should they refuse. The small council were with the Hand outside the walls of Duskendale, with the realm being ruled from Tywin's tent. Several were bold enough to argue against Lord Tywin's plans on the grounds that such an attack would goad Lord Dennis into killing King Aerys. He may or may not, Lord Tywin told them, but if he does, we have a better king right here, wherein Tywin pointed to the young Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Scholars have debated ever since as to Lord Tywin's true intent. Did he believe Lord Darklyn would back down, or was he, in truth, willing and perhaps eager to see Aerys die, so Prince Rhaegar might take the Iron Throne? No one will ever know for certain, thanks to the courage of Ser Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard. Ser Barristan offered to enter the town in secret, find his way to the Dunfort, and spirit the king to safety. Selmy had been known as Barristan the Bold since his youth, but this was a boldness that Tywin Lannister felt bordered on madness. Yet, such was his respect for the prowess and courage of Ser Barristan that he gave him 24 hours to attempt this plan before storming Duskendale. The songs of Ser Barristan's daring rescue of the king are numerous, and, for a rarity, the singers hardly had to embolden it. Ser Barristan did indeed scale the walls unseen in the dark of night, using nothing but his bare hands, and he did disguise himself as a hooded beggar as he made his way to the Dunfort. It is also true as well that he managed to scale the walls of the Dunfort, in turn, killing a guard on the walkways before he could raise the alarm. Then, by stealth and courage, he found his way to the dungeon where the king was being kept. By the time he had Aerys out of the dungeon, the king's absence had been noted, and a hue and the cry went up, and the true breadth of Ser Barristan's heroism was revealed, for he stood and fought rather than surrender himself or his king. And not only did he fight, but he struck first, taking Lord Darklyn's good brother and master-at-arms, Sir Simon Hollard, and a pair of guards unawares, slaying them all, and so avenging the death of his sworn brother, Sir Gaunt of the Kingsguard, who had been killed at Hollard's hand. He hurried the king to the stables, fighting his way through those who tried to intervene, and the two were able to ride out of the Dunfort before the castle gates could be closed. Then there was a wild ride through the streets of Duskendale, while horns and trumpets sounded the alarm, and a race up to the walls as Lord Tywin's archers attempted to clear it of defenders. With the king escaped and safe, there was nothing left for Lord Darklyn save surrender. But it is doubtful he knew the terrible revenge the king intended. When Darklyn and his family were presented to him in chains, Aerys demanded their deaths, and not only Darklyn's immediate kin, but his uncles and aunts, and even distant kinsmen in Duskendale itself. Even his distant kin in the Hollards were attainted and destroyed. Only Sir Simon Hollard's young nephew Dontus Hollard was spared, and only then because Ser Barristan begged that mercy as a boon, and the king he had saved could not refuse him. As to Lady Serala, hers was a crueler death. Aerys had the lace serpent's tongue and womanly parts torn out before she was burned alive.